John Legend penned an open letter to President Obama. This was in Rolling Stone. We'll provide the link because I'm only going to hit a couple highlights from the letter. So we'll provide the link to the full letter in Rolling Stone. But the letter was asking President Obama to pardon nonviolent drug offenders or to commute the sentences, to lessen the sentences. So let me read a couple of excerpts from the letter. So first of all, he wanted to, in the letter, it kind of starts, it's not from John Legend, but in the beginning of the letter, it mentions some of his, John Legend's upbringing, that he was, he grew up witnessing his mother struggle with depression and with drug abuse, and then she went into prison. So this is not only a necessary discussion to have, but this is very personal for John Legend. Then it goes into his open letter, and he thanks the Obama administration for already taking steps to reduce the use of federal private prisons and end solitary confinement of minors, as well as, in addition to that, the unprecedented 1,093 commuted sentences, mostly for drug-related offenses, that President Obama has already granted. So he thanks the Obama administration for doing just that. But then he goes into, quote, "While we hope the Trump administration and the 115th Congress will maintain this progress and continue to work in a bipartisan manner to reform our criminal justice system, it is unclear what their priorities will be and when families can expect justice. Before you leave office, I would like to add my voice to the more than 2 million Americans who have asked you to use your clemency and pardon powers to bring justice to the thousands of families of nonviolent drug offenders who have waited far too long for Congress to act." And then he also says an estimated 36,000 nonviolent drug offenders housed in federal prisons have sought relief under your clemency initiative, and it is unclear how many of the remaining cases will be reviewed before you leave. As the Surgeon General noted, drug addiction is not a moral failing, but a chronic health issue deserving our compassion. What is a moral failing, however, is the war on drugs and America's addiction to incarceration, which has not increased safety, but needlessly torn families apart. Well said. Thoughts, 5 words or less.
A fair and just request.
A John legendary Hail Mary.
Yeah.
Legendary.
C-13th. Such an important documentary that touches on all of this with the criminal justice system and how the 13th Amendment was an extension of slavery. And it's so important because in that documentary, and kind of echoing what John Legend said, you see these families being torn apart. And if you were to look at like drug offenses, or even not even drug offenses, but drug usage in affluent neighborhoods versus minority or inner city neighborhoods, it's proportionate. But then it's disproportionate, the amount of arrests, because there's neighborhoods, these minority or inner city neighborhoods are over-policed. And then if they do get charged, they can't fight the sentences, and so then they're convicted. And I think it's, go ahead.
Also mandatory minimums.
Right, I was
Yeah,
say,
absolutely. And but I think it's
yeah.
important if you guys can to watch 13th, because I know reading this letter is really important as well. Go to rollingstone.com, very important.
And also for-profit prisons. There's a lot
Yes.
going on here that you do learn about in 13th, which is important to check out, but also just to educate yourself on. I didn't know as few as maybe like a year or two ago that there were prisons that make a profit and that stand to gain and also stand to lose if they do not keep the prisons full.
This
it's
is a
gold
fundamental
rush.
issue in government, okay? So there's a lot of people who say that a business person should run the government. And I get that because they say there's a lot of waste in government and business is all about efficiencies. But there are certain aspects of government where business interests are so dangerous. For example, for-profit prisons. Doesn't take a business major to understand that if my job is to make money off of prison, I'm going to want as many people to be sent to prison as possible.
And to stay in prison.
And to stay, and the same goes with healthcare. With healthcare, if you privatize healthcare, there's this thing in economics called an inelastic demand, which means no matter how high the price is, you're going to want to pay it because no matter what it is, it's not going to discourage you from, with the inelastic demand, is staying alive. So people will pay higher and higher prices if they have to. Right. They'll mortgage their house to stay alive. So the government is that thing that should step in and say, guys, let me just kind of, let me alleviate that. Let's run it not like a business.
But who are the people disproportionately going to prison? It's the African American community.
With drug
it's the
offenses.
minority community with drug offenses, and it's bullshit because and I think it's so, and the families that are torn apart. When I worked on Dr. Drew, we would have people that would come on that were suffering from losing their family members to drug offenses, and their family is broken. You have the mom who's struggling to try to support the family. She's gone 24/7. Maybe she's self-medicating because she can't take it all on. Then you've got the kids raising themselves, and they have a higher likelihood to also get into shitty situations. And it's this constantly like self-revolving, how do you say prophecy? Like this
It's self-fulfilling
self-fulfilling
prophecy
prophecy.
and a revolving door when
and
it
a
comes to
revolving
prison.
door. Thank you,
And then
Jason. Let's get Jason. in.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not too much educated on the stats of what goes on in prisons, but I know families that have been torn apart by kids that are incarcerated, children like 18 to 24, adults that are. And I agree, it does tear families apart. And you are so right, Sam. Back home, I have a friend who's been addicted to heroin since 2006, and his mom is a very upstanding person in the community. There's 4 other kids, and that family has suffered and suffered, and it's so sad to see what they were to what they are now, all because of drugs and alcohol. So I think John Legend is so right. And some people are going to argue that, well, those people that are in jail, they're hurting our communities by what's the word I'm looking for? Selling drugs, I guess.
Get them
or-
treatment.
Exactly.
The recidivism rate is so much worse when you don't give them treatment. Then
Yeah.
they go back to jail and back to jail, and they're not getting better.
We have more, of any developed nation, we have the highest rate of incarceration. So more people per 100 are in prison in America than any of the countries that spring to mind right now when you're trying to compare it to. Maybe not China, maybe not Russia, a lot of that is unofficial, like people disappear, but definitely like among most countries. And this thing called mandatory minimums, and in California we had the 3 strikes law, where we
Yes,
said the
that was-
drugs are bad,
Wow.
and the way we should handle it is by putting drug offenders in prison, not treating them. So they said, let's throw the book of law at them. Now, what happens in what had happened until they reformed it in California was if you had 3 offenses, no matter what, you could face life in prison, even
More-
if each time you had this much weed on you.
More than rapists, more than murder. It's insane.
And so that's the kind of thing that those laws have been changed. And so Obama has, he's tried, and he's going to be the first president since Johnson who has a lower prison population than when he took office. So he is doing a lot of stuff. Now, one of the specific things that Legend's pointing at is called a categorical pardon. That's something that Carter and Ford did for people who conscientiously objected to the draft in Vietnam. And that's to say, until now, the thing that Legend is so frustrated with is that every one of those 1,093 commuted sentences had to go through like this crazy ass process. And the process had been put in place a while because Obama's like, I want to pardon nonviolent drug offenders. But the process was so annoying. So this is one of those things where if you want to know what thing to write to your congressperson is to say, listen, let's do a categorical pardoning of people who fit the bill of specifically things like crack, where like crack and powder cocaine are both cocaine.
Different
But
sentences.
For a long time, it was literally like 100 to 1 how much worse it was to be arrested for crack than it was for powder cocaine.
Yeah.
And you don't need to go to like a frat party to realize what kind of people are shoving it up their nose versus lighting it on fire.
Absolutely right, Brett.
And if
yes,
I could
final
just
thought.
add one
Yep,
final thought. I think this is really important to raise awareness, and I think letters like this from John Legend in Rolling Stone are amazing for that. But ultimately, even if President Obama does pardon and put this in place, it still is just treating a symptom of a system that is really broken. And you have these overworked public defenders, and it's just no one is getting a fair shake out of this deal. So I'm glad that this is raising awareness, but we all need to, like you were saying, Brett, write to your, locally elected officials and make a change to the system itself, because even if these people get pardoned, there's still other people that could be, that are still going to be serving under a really broken system. Again, I can't say for-profit prisons have to stop.
Dude, I just watched Orange is the New Black this last season to understand that. It does a really good job of it, actually. I talked to tons of prosecutors who are like, we don't want to put these people in prison for that long. It's just the stupid rule.
It's
a
the
lot
rule.
of the letters written to the president are from judges being like, this is so stupid. They've changed the law. Some people are still in prison for life, even though the law has changed since then. Set them free. So that plus people getting in and going into prison for a long time, they don't know how to live when they get out.
Yeah.
The recidivism rate's crazy because we don't treat it like a health problem.
We don't treat it like a health
crime.
problem, no. So please check out the letter, check out 13th, and I like what you said, to echo what you said, go ahead and write your elected officials. It's really important that we all take a stand, and we'll see you next time on Pop Culture.